When a Boeing 787 lost control at 35,000 feet, both experienced pilots gave up hope. Alarms screamed. Systems failed. Passengers prepared to die. But then a teenage girl walked into the cockpit. She had never flown a real plane before. This is her incredible true story of courage and survival. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The Boeing 787 flew smoothly through the bright blue sky. Sunlight reflected off its silver wings as it cut through white clouds like a knife through butter. Inside the cabin, everything seemed perfect. Passengers sat comfortably in their seats, some reading books, others watching movies on small screens. Flight attendants walked down the aisles with warm smiles, offering drinks and snacks. The gentle hum of the engines created a peaceful sound that made many people feel sleepy. It was just another normal flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo. Nothing special. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what everyone thought. In seat 22A sat Lena Carter. She was 19 years old with bright green eyes and dark brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. On her lap lay a thick aviation textbook filled with diagrams of aircraft systems and emergency procedures. She studied the pages carefully while sipping orange juice from a plastic cup. Lena had loved airplanes since she was a little girl. Her father was a retired Air Force pilot who now worked as a flight consultant in Japan. He had taught her everything about flying. They spent countless hours together in flight simulators. He showed her every button, every switch, and every instrument in the cockpit. By the time she was 15, Lena could identify any airplane just by listening to its engines. Now she was on her way to visit her father in Tokyo. But this trip was more than just a family visit. Lena was studying to become a commercial pilot. It was her dream. She wanted to sit in the cockpit and fly passengers safely across the world. She had completed 3 years of aviation school and had hundreds of hours in simulators. But she had never flown a real commercial jet. Not yet. As she read her textbook, Lena felt the familiar excitement in her chest. One day soon, she would be the one in control of a plane like this. One day, she would be responsible for hundreds of lives. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. In the cockpit at the front of the plane, Captain Robert Harris sat in the left seat. He was 56 years old with gray hair and calm blue eyes. He had been flying commercial jets for over 30 years. Next to him sat First Officer David Malik, who was younger at 32 with sharp features and quick movements. They were both experienced pilots who had flown this route dozens of times. "Beautiful day for flying," Captain Harris said, glancing at the clear sky ahead. "Perfect conditions," Malik agreed, checking the instrument panel. "We should arrive in Tokyo right on schedule." The autopilot was engaged, and all the systems showed green lights. Everything was working perfectly. The weather radar displayed no storms ahead. It was the kind of flight every pilot loves. Easy, smooth, and boring in the best possible way. But the sky can change faster than anyone expects. 2 hours into the flight, Lena noticed something strange. Her cup of orange juice began to vibrate slightly on the tray table. At first, she thought it was normal turbulence. But then the vibration grew stronger. The liquid in her cup created small waves that rippled from side to side. She looked out the window. The clouds below had changed. They were no longer white and fluffy. Now they looked gray and thick, rolling and swirling like an angry ocean. Lena's training kicked in immediately. She recognized the signs of developing weather. Her heart beat a little faster. The seatbelt sign above her head lit up with a soft chime. Ding! A flight attendant's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We're expecting some light turbulence." Lena fastened her seatbelt and closed her textbook. She watched as flight attendants quickly moved through the cabin, checking that passengers were secure and putting away loose items. Their smiles remained, but Lena could see tension in their movements. They felt it too. This wasn't normal turbulence. Suddenly, the plane shook hard. It felt like hitting a speed bump in a car, except they were 7 miles above the ground. A baby started crying. Someone's bag fell from an overhead compartment. A woman gasped loudly. In the cockpit, warning lights began flashing on the instrument panel. Captain Harris and First Officer Malik both leaned forward, their relaxed attitudes disappearing instantly. "Hydraulic system 2 showing low pressure," Malik said, his voice tight with concern. "What?" Captain Harris responded, immediately flipping switches to check the readings. "That shouldn't be possible. The backup system should compensate automatically." But the backup system didn't compensate. Instead, more warning lights appeared. Red and amber lights blinked across the panel like stars appearing in a night sky. The plane shook again, harder this time. "Autopilot disengaged," Malik announced, his hands moving quickly across the controls. Captain Harris grabbed the control yoke, the wheel-like device that controls the plane's pitch and roll. "I've got manual control," he said. But even as he spoke, he could feel something was wrong. The yoke felt stiff and unresponsive, like trying to steer a car with the power steering broken. Outside the cockpit windows, they could see dark storm clouds forming rapidly ahead. Lightning flashed in the distance. The weather radar, which had been clear just minutes ago, now showed large red and orange patches. Severe weather was developing right in their path. "Tokyo Center, this is Flight 982, Captain Harris spoke into his radio headset. "We are experiencing hydraulic failure and static." The radio cut out completely, replaced by harsh crackling noise. "Communication failure," Malik said, his voice rising slightly. "Radio is dead." Captain Harris tried the backup radio frequency. More static. They had lost all communication with air traffic control. They were alone in the sky with a damaged aircraft and no way to call for help. The plane tilted suddenly to the left. Passengers screamed as their world went sideways. Books, phones, and cups flew through the cabin. Flight attendants grabbed onto seats to keep from falling. "I'm losing control," Captain Harris shouted, pulling hard on the yoke. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His hands gripped the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. Malik worked frantically, trying different systems and backup procedures. "Hydraulic pressure is completely gone. I can't control the rudder or the stabilizers. We're flying on engine thrust alone." For a pilot, this was a nightmare scenario. Modern commercial jets rely on hydraulic systems to control the flight surfaces, the parts of the wing and tail that make the plane turn, climb, and descend. Without hydraulics, the plane becomes almost impossible to fly. It's like trying to drive a car when the steering wheel, brakes, and gas pedal all stop working at the same time. An alarm began screaming in the cockpit. "Stall warning!" Malik shouted. A stall in aviation doesn't mean the engines stop. It means the wings lose lift, and the plane begins to fall from the sky. Captain Harris pushed the yoke forward to lower the nose, trying to gain speed and prevent the stall. The plane dove, and passengers felt their stomachs rise into their throats. For several terrifying seconds, the two pilots fought the controls. They used every bit of their training and experience. They tried emergency procedures they had practiced in simulators but never expected to use in real life. The plane shook violently. Alarms screamed. Warning lights flashed. Lightning illuminated the dark clouds surrounding them. And then Captain Harris did something that shocked his co-pilot. He let go of the controls and leaned back in his seat. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. The weight of 30 years of flying suddenly felt crushing. "We can't do it," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "We can't recover this aircraft." Malik stared at him in disbelief. What are you saying? I'm saying the systems are gone, David. We've lost hydraulics, communications, and partial engine control. We're not pilots anymore. We're just passengers waiting to crash. Those words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, Malik couldn't respond. He looked at the control panel covered in red warning lights. He looked at his captain, a man he respected and trusted, now defeated and broken. He looked out the window at the storm raging around them. And he knew Captain Harris was right. They had done everything they could. Sometimes, that isn't enough. At that exact moment, in the passenger cabin, oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling with a sudden hiss. Yellow plastic masks dangled in front of every seat, swinging wildly as the plane continued to shake. The lights flickered. Some passengers screamed. Others prayed. Parents pulled masks over their children's faces with trembling hands. Lena Carter sat frozen for only a second. Then her training took over. She looked at the oxygen mask in front of her, then at the terrified faces around her. She listened to the sounds of the aircraft, the groaning of metal, the uneven roar of the engines, the whistling of wind. Every sound told her something. The engines were still running, but they sounded wrong. The plane was descending, but not in a controlled way. And most telling of all, there were no announcements from the cockpit. No calm voice telling passengers what to do. No updates about the situation. That silence told Lena everything she needed to know. The pilots weren't in control. And if they weren't in control, everyone on this plane would die. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to move. She grabbed the back of each seat as she made her way forward, the tilting floor making every step difficult. "Ma'am, you need to sit down," a flight attendant called out, her own voice shaking with fear. "I need to get to the cockpit," Lena said firmly. "You can't. It's locked. Federal regulations." "Then we're all going to die," Lena interrupted, looking the attendant directly in the eyes. "I'm a pilot trainee. I've studied these systems for 4 years. Please, you have to let me try." The flight attendant looked at this young girl with her ponytail and student backpack. For a moment, she hesitated. But then she saw something in Lena's eyes. Determination. Confidence. Knowledge. She made a decision that went against every rule she knew. "Go," she said, pointing toward the front of the plane. Lena ran forward as fast as the tilting aircraft would allow. She reached the reinforced cockpit door and pounded on it with both fists. "Captain. Open the door. I can help." No response. Only the muffled sound of alarms from inside. She pounded again, harder. "Please. I'm a pilot trainee. Let me in." Several seconds passed. Each one felt like an hour. Then the door cracked open slightly, and First Officer Malik's face appeared. He looked terrible. His face was drenched in sweat, his eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Lena Carter. I've been studying aviation for 4 years. I know these systems. Please, let me help." Malik looked at her for only a moment. In that moment, he made a calculation. What did they have to lose? They were going to crash anyway. Maybe this girl knew something they didn't. Maybe she could see something fresh that their tired, panicked minds couldn't process. "Get in," he said, opening the door. Lena stepped into the cockpit, and her heart nearly stopped. It looked like a disaster zone. Red lights blinked everywhere. Alarms screamed from multiple systems. Papers and charts had fallen to the floor. Captain Harris sat slumped in his seat, his face buried in his hands, completely defeated. But Lena didn't freeze. Her father had drilled emergency procedures into her mind thousands of times. She had spent hundreds of hours in simulators dealing with every possible failure. And now, facing the real thing, her training took over. "What's our situation?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady as she slid into the empty jump seat behind the pilots. Malik's voice shook as he answered. "Primary and backup hydraulic systems have failed. We've lost communication with air traffic control. We can't control the flight surfaces properly. The plane is descending, and we can't stop it. We're at 23,000 feet and dropping fast." Lena's eyes scanned the instrument panel. Her mind processed information at lightning speed. Altitude. Airspeed. Heading. Engine performance. Attitude indicator. Everything she had studied in textbooks was now right in front of her, but nothing was working correctly. "Switch to manual control on the secondary axis," she said quickly. "What?" Malik looked confused. "Do it now." Lena's voice was firm and commanding, sounding much older than her 19 years. Malik obeyed, flipping several switches. The plane jolted, but then it steadied slightly. Just a little, but enough to notice. Captain Harris lifted his head slowly, looking at this young girl who had somehow appeared in his cockpit. "Who are you?" he asked weakly. "Lena Carter, student pilot. And I'm going to help you save this aircraft," she said, not taking her eyes off the instruments. "You don't understand," Harris said, his voice hollow. "The systems are destroyed. We can't control it. We're going to crash." "Not if I can help it," Lena replied. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. But her voice remained calm. Her father's lessons echoed in her mind: stay calm, assess the situation, work the problem step by step. The plane lurched again, dropping suddenly. Lena grabbed the co-pilot's control yoke. She could feel it vibrating in her hands, feel the massive aircraft fighting against her. But she also felt it respond, just a little. "The plane is still listening," she said. "We still have partial control through the engines. We can do this." She adjusted the throttles on both engines, increasing power to the left engine slightly while decreasing the right. The plane began to level out. It was rough, shaky, and far from perfect, but it was working. Malik stared at her in amazement. "You actually stabilized it." "Not completely," Lena said, sweat now forming on her own forehead. "We're still descending. 21,000 feet. But at least we're not spinning." She reached for the radio controls, manually adjusting the frequency. Her fingers moved quickly, punching in the emergency frequency. "Tokyo Center, this is Flight 982. Emergency. Both pilots are incapacitated. I am a student pilot attempting manual control. Do you copy?" "Static." She tried again, adjusting the frequency slightly. "Tokyo Center, this is Flight 982. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday." More static. Then, faintly, a voice broke through the interference. "Flight 982, this is Tokyo Center. We read you weak but readable. Identify yourself." Relief flooded through Lena. They weren't alone anymore. "This is Lena Carter, passenger and pilot trainee. Both pilots are unable to continue. Hydraulic systems have failed. I'm attempting to stabilize the aircraft using engine controls only." There was a pause on the other end. Lena could imagine the shock in the control tower. A student pilot? A passenger? Flying a commercial jet? "Lena," the voice came back, calmer now and more authoritative, "this is Tokyo Center. We have you on radar. You're currently at 19,000 feet and descending at 800 feet per minute. That's too fast. You need to reduce your descent rate immediately." "I'm trying," Lena muttered, adjusting the engine throttles again. The plane responded sluggishly, like a sick animal that didn't want to move. But it did move. The descent rate began to slow. 700 feet per minute. 600. 500. "That's better," the voice from Tokyo Center said. Maintain current heading. We're clearing all traffic from your path. Captain Harris watched Lena work, his professional pride battling with his amazement. This girl, barely out of school, was doing what he couldn't. She was actually flying the plane. How are you doing this? He asked softly. Lena didn't look away from the instruments. My father taught me. He's a pilot. We spent years in simulators together. He always said, the plane wants to fly. Your job is to let it. I'm just listening to what the plane is telling me. The aircraft shook violently as they entered another patch of turbulence. Rain hammered against the windshield. Lightning flashed so close it temporarily blinded them. The storm that had seemed distant before was now all around them. We need to descend below this weather, Lena said. The turbulence is making it impossible to maintain control. Descending into a storm is dangerous, Malik warned. Staying up here is more dangerous, Lena replied. Trust me. She pushed the throttles down slightly, allowing the plane to descend faster but in a controlled way. The aircraft dropped through layers of thick clouds. Wind buffeted them from all sides. The plane rolled left, then right. Warning alarms continued to scream. In the passenger cabin, people cried and prayed. Some held hands with strangers. Others wrote text messages to loved ones, hoping they would somehow be delivered. Everyone knew they might have only minutes left to live. But in the cockpit, Lena Carter fought with every bit of strength and knowledge she had. Her arms ached from holding the control yoke. Her shoulders burned. Sweat ran down her face. But she didn't let go. They broke through the bottom of the clouds at 15,000 feet. Below them, through breaks in the rain, Lena could see lights. The city of Tokyo spread out in all directions, a galaxy of lights in the darkness. We're below the worst of it, she said, breathing hard. The turbulence is less down here. You did it, Malik said, almost laughing with relief and disbelief. You actually stabilized us. We're not safe yet, Lena said. We still have to land this plane. Captain Harris, who had been silent for several minutes, finally spoke. His voice was stronger now, some of his confidence returning. There's an airport 40 miles ahead. Haneda. It's Tokyo's main airport. If we can maintain control, we might be able to reach it. Then that's where we're going, Lena said with determination. For the next 20 minutes, Lena flew the damaged aircraft toward Tokyo. Every second required complete focus. The slightest mistake would send them into a fatal spin. She constantly adjusted the engines, using differences in thrust to control the plane's direction since the normal flight controls weren't working properly. Tokyo Center guided her, giving updates on their position and heading. Emergency crews at Haneda Airport scrambled, preparing for what they expected would be a crash landing. Fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue helicopters stood ready. Flight 982, you're 10 miles from the airport, Tokyo Center reported. Runway 34 is clear for your emergency landing. Winds are from the east at 18 knots. Can you maintain control for landing? Lena looked at the instrument panel. She looked at her hands on the controls. She looked at the lights of the airport ahead, growing larger by the second. She thought of her father and all the times he had made her practice emergency landings in the simulator. She had done it dozens of times in practice. But this was real. Real lives depended on her. I'll do my best, she said into the radio. That's all anyone can ask, the controller replied. Captain Harris leaned forward. Listen, Lena. Landing without hydraulics is nearly impossible. The landing gear might not deploy properly. The brakes might not work. If you can't control it at the last second, aim for the grass beside the runway. Better to slide than to flip. Lena nodded, her face pale but focused. Understood. Gear down, Malik said, reaching for the control. He flipped the switch that should lower the landing wheels. A grinding sound filled the cockpit. For several terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then they heard a heavy thunk from beneath them. Main landing gear down and locked, Malik reported, checking the indicators. Nose gear showing uncertain. It might not be fully deployed. We'll land anyway, Lena said firmly. The runway appeared ahead of them, a long strip of concrete lined with bright lights. It looked so small from up here, like trying to land on a tightrope. Emergency vehicles with flashing red and blue lights lined both sides, waiting. Flight 982, you are cleared to land, Tokyo Center said. Good luck. Lena took a deep breath. This was it. Everything came down to the next 60 seconds. She reduced engine power slightly, allowing the plane to descend. The ground rushed up to meet them. She fought to keep the wings level as crosswinds pushed them sideways. Her arms trembled from the effort. Every muscle in her body was tense. Speed 160 knots, Malik called out. Still too fast. I know, Lena said through gritted teeth. She reduced power more, but not too much. If they slowed down too much, the plane would stall and drop from the sky. 1,000 feet above the ground. 500 feet. 200 feet. The runway lights rushed toward them. Lena pulled back gently on the yoke, raising the nose slightly. This was called the flare, the critical moment just before touchdown. Boom! The main landing gear hit the runway hard. The impact was so violent it felt like they'd been in a car accident. The plane bounced once, then hit again. Sparks flew from the wheels. Passengers screamed. Luggage flew from overhead bins. Reverse thrust. Lena shouted. Malik pulled the levers that made the engines run in reverse, helping to slow them down. The engines roared. The nose of the plane dropped suddenly as the front landing gear, which hadn't deployed properly, scraped along the concrete. More sparks erupted. Metal screamed against pavement. Hold it steady. Captain Harris yelled, grabbing his control yoke to help Lena keep the plane straight. Together, they fought to keep the aircraft on the centerline of the runway. The plane wanted to veer off to the left. Without proper steering control, it was like trying to drive a car on ice. But inch by inch, second by second, the speed decreased. 100 knots. 80 knots. 60 knots. 40. And then, finally, silence. The massive Boeing 787, damaged and battered, rolled to a complete stop in the middle of the runway. Smoke rose from the tires and the scraped nose gear. Emergency lights flashed everywhere. But they were down. They were safe. For several seconds, nobody in the cockpit moved. They were too shocked, too exhausted, too overwhelmed by what had just happened. Lena's arms fell to her sides. Her whole body was shaking. She couldn't believe it. They had actually made it. You did it, Malik whispered, staring at her with wide eyes. You actually landed it. Captain Harris turned in his seat to look at the young girl who had saved them all. His voice was thick with emotion. You just saved 326 people, Miss Carter. Lena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The reality of it all crashed over her like a wave. She had flown a commercial jet. She had saved hundreds of lives. She, a 19-year-old student who had never even flown a real plane before today. From the passenger cabin behind them came a sound. It started quietly, then grew louder and louder. Applause. Cheering. Crying. Shouting. The sound of hundreds of people celebrating their survival. Emergency crews surrounded the aircraft within seconds. Firefighters in protective gear checked for fires. Paramedics rushed forward with stretchers. Airport officials shouted orders. Stairs were rolled up to the emergency exits, and passengers began to evacuate. But Lena remained in the cockpit, staring out the windshield at the sunrise painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Dad," she whispered, "I did it. I actually flew your plane home." Hours later, after every passenger had been safely evacuated and checked by paramedics, Lena sat in an airport office wrapped in a blanket. Officials questioned her, trying to understand how a student pilot had accomplished what seemed impossible. News cameras gathered outside. The story was already spreading around the world. Her phone rang. It was her father calling from his apartment in Tokyo. "Lena?" His voice was shaking. "Lena, I just heard. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad," she said, and suddenly she was crying. All the fear and stress she had been holding back poured out. "Dad, I was so scared." "I know, sweetheart. But you did it. You remembered everything I taught you. I am so incredibly proud of you." The plane wanted to crash. The pilots gave up. Everything was failing. "But you didn't give up," her father said gently. "That's what makes you a real pilot, Lena. Not the license or the hours logged. It's knowing what to do when everything goes wrong and having the courage to do it." By the next morning, Lena Carter's name was everywhere. News channels around the world told her story. Student pilot saves hundreds in emergency landing. Teenage girl becomes hero at 35,000 feet. The pilot who refused to give up. Aviation experts analyzed what she had done. Many said it should have been impossible. Landing a commercial jet without hydraulics, with limited control, in bad weather, with no real experience, the odds were astronomical. But Lena had done it anyway. The Federal Aviation Administration launched an investigation. They interviewed everyone involved. They examined the aircraft and found that multiple systems had indeed failed simultaneously, a rare and catastrophic event. They concluded that without Lena's intervention, the plane would almost certainly have crashed. Captain Harris spoke publicly about what happened. His voice was filled with both humility and admiration. "I've been flying for 30 years, he told reporters. "I thought I'd seen everything. But when those systems failed, I was overwhelmed. I gave up. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. Lena Carter did what I couldn't. She saved all of us. She deserves every bit of recognition she gets." First Officer Malik agreed. She was calm, focused, and incredibly knowledgeable. She flew that plane better than many licensed pilots could have under those conditions. "I'm alive because of her." Awards followed. Aviation organizations gave her medals. The airline offered her a full scholarship to complete her pilot training. Airlines around the world expressed interest in hiring her once she got her license. But through it all, Lena remained humble. "I just did what anyone with my training would have done," she told reporters. "I refused to accept that we were going to crash. My father taught me that the plane always wants to fly. You just have to listen to it and work with it, not against it." But everyone who heard her story knew the truth. What Lena did that day was extraordinary. She had faced impossible odds and won. She had looked death in the face and refused to blink. 6 months later, Lena completed her commercial pilot training at the top of her class. On the day she received her pilot's license, her father pinned it to her uniform shirt with tears in his eyes. "You've already proven yourself," he told her. "That piece of paper just makes it official." Lena went on to have a remarkable career in aviation. She became one of the youngest captains in commercial aviation history. She gave talks at aviation schools, teaching future pilots about emergency procedures and the importance of staying calm under pressure. Her story became required reading in pilot training programs around the world. But she never forgot that day. The day she was just a passenger with a dream. The day everything went wrong at 35,000 feet. The day 2 experienced pilots gave up, and a 19-year-old girl with textbook knowledge and her father's lessons saved 326 lives. Sometimes, when she was flying and everything was calm and routine, Lena would think back to that terrifying flight. She would remember the feeling of the controls in her hands, the fear in her chest, and the determination in her heart. She would remember proving that age and experience aren't everything. Sometimes courage and knowledge are enough. And she would smile, grateful for the second chance she had given herself and everyone on that plane. Grateful that when the impossible happened, she had been ready. The sky had tested her that day. And she had passed.